Hello music fans, Uncle Roddus here again with another video. Hasn't been a lot of new records coming in recently. I've had all these box sets coming in, so they kind of clean me out money wise, and so I'm kind of scaling back a little bit of what I'm buying, you know, just to try and not to blow all my money as you do. So I wanted to, this is more of a topical video. There's quite a lot of records here, most of which I've shown before, but I just want to talk a little bit more about them and about this genre of music, because for me, when I got into my early days of getting into my first days of getting into music, you know, when I was around about 13, 1980, and you know, like, I mean, obviously there was a lot of the pop hits that were going around at the time that I got into, you know, things like The Police, My Sex, which is a New Zealand band, stuff like that. But as I found student radio and another radio station that used to play a lot of more alternative music after dark, that I had found, I was exposed to a lot more punk music. I had missed the first wave of punk, you know, the late 70s. And a lot of those bands had already moved on and disbanded, of course, the Sex Pistols. And so I was getting exposed to some of those bands through student radio. Of course, the Sex Pistols just blew my mind when I was 14. Of course, that was well after the fact, and they'd well and truly gone by that stage, so we're talking 1981. But I had picked up some earlier punk stuff like some Buzzcocks, which I don't have on vinyl anymore, or some Stiff Little Fingers, the Stranglers, most of which I all now have on CD. Actually, just picked this one up recently. It's a reissue from 2014. First time I've had that on vinyl for many years. As a matter of fact, I don't even have the CD. I actually have the Kiss This compilation, which has all the music on that anyway. So what I'm mainly going to talk about, so for me, punk was a big music, you know, big influence on me, and I really loved it, and I loved the adrenaline and the energy of it, and I got right into the British punk movement. And by the time I got to high school, of course, at that stage, we were getting a lot of the hardcore British stuff coming through here, so I was getting into Exploited, GBH, Killing Joke were going strong at that stage. I got into them, and I picked up quite a lot of compilations in those days of punk music, and unfortunately most of those compilations I don't have anymore on vinyl. Well, none of them I had, apart from a couple I've just recently picked up again, and I've been tracking them down on CD. I do have, so for me, important compilations were the Punk and Disorderly compilations. There were 3 volumes of those that came out on Cherry Red Records, from memory, out of England. So they had a lot of the hardcore, you know, the Exploiteds and the GBHs, as I said, and a lot of stuff like that. I was also into Crass and Subhuman, so more of the anarcho punk. I really like them as well. I've got a few Crass records on CD. But I've shown this before, and I've recently picked up a copy of it. This was one of the most important and early compilations that I picked up on punk. Burning Ambitions, A History of Punk. This came out on Cherry Red Records in 19... Yeah, typical, can't find it. I think it was about 1983, 84, to be honest. So it's because it's kind of like a, yeah, well, it is, it's a history. And so it starts off on side 1 with the Buzzcocks and The Fool, Wire 12XU, which is a fantastic song, even going back as far as the 101ers with Keys for Your Heart, which was, as we know, was Joe Strummer's first band. And then it kind of goes on through, you know, the Stranglers, X-Ray Specs, Swell Maps, The Saints. So a lot of classics on here. Side 3, Adam and the Ants, The Damned, Boomtown Rats, so when they were really early stuff from them, UK subs. And then it starts getting a bit heavier. We get Killing Joke, Anti-Pasty, and then side 4 we got, so obviously we're heading around at 1980, 81, we've got the hardcore stuff coming through with the Exploited, the Dead Kennedys, the Vice Squad, the Partisans, GBH, Disorder, and then finishes off with an angelic upstarts. Yeah, so this album here, man, this absolutely got thrashed to death when I was like, you know, a teenager. I mean, I guess I must have picked it up after I left school, because I'm not sure if I would have had the money to buy it otherwise. Although I did manage to grab a few. I mean, I managed to score a few records while I was still at school, but not a hell of a lot. So this is fantastic. I just picked this up about 6 months ago. It's in reasonably good. The cover's in pretty good nick. Record plays alright. It's a little bit of noise on it, but yeah, absolutely essential punk compilation. And then another one, and I haven't got many on LP now of the ones I had, but another one that was really cool at the time, Backstage Pass. This one here, Slaughter and the Dogs, UK Subs, Angelic Upstarts, Exploited. But there's also a mix. There's a few other little bands that I don't know so well. I didn't know so well at the time. I mean, I know the song Cyanide's got a great track called Fireball. Manufactured Romance, yeah, so they're a little bit more obscure. Manufactured Romance got 2 songs, sorry. Antipasties, oh, they're the same bands again. Kind of similar each side. Yeah, good album, this, good compilation. Actually saw it on the wall at the record shop. Can't find a release date on it either, again, unfortunately. But again, in the 80s, early 80s. So that was 2 of the many punk compilations that I had on album at the time. You know, it's funny because someone said to me when I was about 18 that a guy who was a few years older than me said, you know, when you get a bit older, you'll grow out of this punk music. Well, it's not looking like that's happening. So this one here is another one that I got recently. This is a bootleg or unofficial release. There are multiple volumes of this stuff from all around the world, and you know, a lot of them from the USA. There's even one from, I think, New Zealand or Australia, around that area. Yeah, and this isn't the best one I've heard. Some pretty good stuff, pretty obscure. Machines, Valves, Excess Energy, none of the Art Attacks, actually, I've heard of them, and they're on another compilation I'm about to show you. Blanks, Stiffs, stuff like that. Clips, 1988. So yeah, this album here is okay. Lots of pretty obscure little punk bands. The punk music on this is a lot different from your mainstream punk. You know, we had the Sex Pistols and we had the Ramones and we had all those bands that got quite well known, but underneath that all was the underground stuff. So that takes us to these recent compilations, which is why I'm making this video, because these things here are just fantastic. So these are the Soul Jazz double albums that have been released over the last 3 years, 6 volumes of obscure underground punk. A lot of bands that I'd never heard of: Urinals, Normals, Electric Eels. No, sorry, I have heard their stuff before. Some very early Tuxedo Moon, the Knots, the Pagans. It's got the Heartbreakers on here, so there is something I do know. The Deadbeats, Randoms. There's a Pierre Ubu's Modern Dance on here. So this covers, you know, very early punk and pre-punk, post-punk, you might call it. I mean, Pierre Ubu aren't really a punk band per se to me, but they've certainly got the attitude, and their music was just fantastic. And the same with Tuxedo Moon, but some of it's pretty raw. The Flaming Groovies, so there's a few pre-punk bands just sort of etching in on here. So these volumes, I just cannot recommend them highly enough if you're into the second tier of punk, the raw, thrashy garage punk that probably more closely resembles, or certainly the really fast and furious ones, the 60s punk, garage punks from the likes of the Back from the Grave compilations and the Pebbles and stuff like that. Although the Back from the Grave was probably the most garagey ones, so they were pretty raw. I think there's a direct line you know, from those bands to these bands, you know, from, you know, you've got your early garage stuff, you know, your teenage garage bands from the USA and all over the world. I mean, we had a few here in New Zealand. I mean, Chance R&B are just a stunning garage band from Christchurch, where I was born, and a few others. So the next volume here, we got another one, is the English version of Volume 1, so underground punk and post-punk in the UK, 77 to 81. Nice gatefold, lots of liner notes, also an insert that talks about the bands. So this is, I was far more familiar with the English theme, but only the stuff that was more, it was pretty more successful and more well known. I know that the hardcore stuff wasn't like hugely successful music, but it seemed to get a lot more distribution. But there's a lot of stuff on here that I don't know. I mean, there are stuff like the Mekons, their first B-side to their first single, Johnny Moped, Television Personalities, Killjoy's track I know I have on another compilation, an early Swell Maps track. But the rest of the stuff I'm not that familiar with. Roses of Red, the Prefix, the Shapes, the Cigarettes, the Cravats, no, I know them, the Scabs, the Now, the Users, the Germs, the Rings. A lot of these bands I really am not familiar with, even on other punk compilations. So they've kind of have got some pretty obscure stuff, but some bloody good stuff. I mean, there's not a lot of weak tracks on there, not a lot, no. So then Volume 3, Sick on You, One Way Spit, After the Love, Before the Revolution. So 1969 to 76. So this is a really good compilation. I mentioned it before. There's a lot of stuff here. Crime, Hotwire My Heart, which is a great song. Early Cabaret Voltaire, Hollywood Brats, Death, a band called Death, which is a black hard rock band from the early 70s. Pre-punk English stuff, the Count Bishops and the 101ers. Yeah, a lot of that cool stuff. So there's a mix of older and newer stuff, and very, very raw. A lot of very raw music. Great notes again, and yeah, highly recommend it. I'm absolutely loving these. So there we go to Volume 4, Burn, Rubber City Burn. So this is concentrated. So these are fairly wide-ranging bands from all over the show, these first 3 volumes, but the next volume they kind of focusing on a more of an area and a scene in an area. So I'm not sure whether they're going to have any more of these compilations come out. I hope they do, because they are really fantastic. I am just loving them so much. So Akron, Ohio, punk and the decline of Midwest, 75 to 80. So there was a real strong scene going on there. A few familiar names, the Waitresses, very early track from Devo, or 2 very early tracks from Devo. There was someone else on here. No, to be honest, I'm not familiar with the rest of the names. So yeah, lots of pretty obscure stuff on here again. So Bizarrios, Hammer Damage, Tin Huey, Rubber City Rebels, Jane Eyre and the Belverdes, yeah, Ralph Carney. Interesting, very interesting. So great music on here as well. Not all of it's, you know, punky. You have to say Devo's a bit more new wavy, if you want to use that word or whatever. They're a bit more bizarre. There's a few other more bizarre tracks, more sort of post-punk. And then the next volume, that stays in Ohio and moves to Cleveland. Extermination, Nights in the Sixth City. Again, nice gatefold. These albums are double albums, but they don't have a lot of tracks on, so there's mainly about 15 minutes per side. I'm not sure why they didn't kind of squeeze a lot more onto them. So yeah, from the Cleveland scene, we have a couple of Pierre Ubu tracks. We've got Final Solution, which is absolutely fantastic. Electric Eels, which I mentioned before, they're from that area. Rocket from the Tomb, which was the band that David Thomas was in before Pierre Ubu. The Pagans, Human Switchboard, yeah, Defnix, XX, Polystyrene Jazz Band. So a lot of these aren't, yeah, they were in the scene, I guess they weren't quite as well known outside of the area, Cleveland, but a couple of them we do know, of course. And then finally, the last volume that's available at the present is this one, and this is probably the best one of the lot. Chaos in the City of Angels and Devils, Hollywood. Punk in Los Angeles, 77 to 81. So you can see the nice... Each album has some pictures of the covers. Some more great liner notes in here. This is a great scene that they had in LA, and the LA one is probably one of the most influential scenes out of the whole lot of them. We've got early stuff from X. For some reason there's an Iggy and the Stooges track on here, but that's fine. We've got the Germs, the Urinals, Circle Jerks, the Bags, the Adolescents, the Dills, TSOL, Hollywood Squares, and some of these songs I was familiar with, and I've got a lot of X CDs because they were one of the best punk bands from the States, but a lot of these weren't familiar to me, the songs weren't familiar to me, so that's great. And this is, like I said, this is the best one. There's nothing on here that I don't like, and it's just full on great, awesome punk. There's only one punk album compilation that I've got and to me it's probably the best one that was ever done, and it was a bootleg. It was like this thing. It was an unofficial put together thing, and it's called Feel Lucky Punk, and it was released in the early 90s, I think, from memory. Now I don't have a copy on vinyl anymore, but I did make a copy of it and put it on CD before I sold off my vinyl collection, and that's just the most awesome. There are awesome punk compilation, and there are a couple of tracks that have turned up on these that were on that thing, and that's the same style as music. So it's really just the really raw garage punk, underground punk, absolutely stunning music. And someone said I was going to grow out of it, and I never did. So that has cleaned me up money-wise quite a bit. They're not hugely expensive, to be honest. They were about $40 each. Most of them I had to get imported from overseas, but via what's it called, Fish Pond, and some from Amazon. I got half from Amazon, about half from Fish Pond, so that's cool, and they were about the same price. So that's my punk compilations so far, and just touching on one I used to have many years ago on a cassette which someone stole, which I managed to get hold of a copy again. This is a Scottish compilation called the Barclay Towers Compilation, Music, Scottish Culture, and I had a copy of this which I had copied off the original record I actually had up at the university radio station here back in the early 80s, or mid 80s I should say. And there's some really good music on here, but particularly Radioactive by a band called the Cheaters. So this is post-punk, and I'm really pleased to have that again, because my copy that I had on cassette got stolen many years ago, and I didn't know that I could still get my hands on one of these until I found Discogs, and this was the only copy available on Discogs. So it is pretty rare, and it didn't cost me too badly. Unfortunately it's got a rip on the cover, but so punk music still sounds okay. I mean, it doesn't psych me as much as I used to when I was 18, but that's fine. I still love it. It's still fantastic music. It's still full of energy, and especially this original stuff. It's just so great to have this period, the initial period from 77 to 81. Of course, I didn't know so much about it in the old days, but now listening to it, it is the best stuff. And as much as I like the old hardcore and the Exploited and those hardcore bands, and the anarcho punk bands, and some of the music I still like, I still listen to the punk and disorderly stuff occasionally. But yeah, so that's my punk video. I hope that was interesting, and hope you enjoyed watching that. And I'm thinking once I get more familiar with all the Miles Davis bootleg series box sets, which have all recently arrived. Now I have all 4 volumes. Then I shall make a video about them, but I need to get to be more familiar with those albums first. But at the moment, I'm focusing on those. So anyway, hope you're all well. Catch you later.